Hi everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel Dr. Srinivas Medical Concepts and my FB page Dr. Srinivas Concepts. This is Dr. Srinivas, neurologist from Andhra Pradesh, India. I am also the medical author of the book Focused Neurology. Today we are going to talk about a very interesting topic, dementia. Dementia, the differential diagnosis of dementia, the core concepts demystified. Dementia, the important concepts of dementia. But what is dementia? Dementia is a gradual, significant impairment of two or more domains of cognition, one of which must be memory, which is sufficient enough to impair the activities of daily living. So dementia is a gradually progressive disorder which has got two imperative cognitive domains, one of which must be memory, which are severe enough to impair activities of daily living. The other cognitive domain may be we've already discussed amnesia. The other cognitive domain may be aphasia, speech deficits, especially the frontotemporal dementias, apraxias, agnosias, especially the parietal lobe, parieto-occipital lobe gets affected, and then the executive function, the planning and organization gets affected. So they can have amnesia, which is very important. One of the two cognitive domains which has to be lost is memory. So amnesia, apraxia, the motor planning gets affected. Aphasia, the speech deficits. Agnosia, the sensory deficits. And then the executive function, that is the planning and organization, gets affected. So they are sufficient enough, they are impaired sufficient enough to affect the activities of daily living. So there are many important types of dementia, but the most common form of dementia is Alzheimer's dementia. Alzheimer's dementia is the most common form of dementia, followed by multi-infarct dementia, dementia with Lewy bodies, Korsakoff psychosis, normal pressure hydrocephalus, prion disease, the Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, the frontotemporal dementias, Huntington's chorea, HIV dementia, and chronic subdural hematoma. But very common are Alzheimer's dementia, multi-infarct dementia, and dementia with Lewy bodies. Alzheimer's dementia. As I said, Alzheimer's dementia is the most common cause of dementia, characterized pathologically by intracellular and extracellular accumulations. Intracellular accumulation of neurofibrillary tangles. They are paired helical filaments. So intracellularly they have neurofibrillary tangles. Extracellularly, outside the cell, they have neuritic plaques, which are nothing but increased amyloid beta protein. So intracellularly they'll have the neurofibrillary tangles, and extracellularly they'll have the plaques. Anatomically, two important regions get affected in Alzheimer's dementia. One is the hippocampus. Hippocampus is known as the GPS of the brain. Hippocampus is responsible for the short-term memory. It is responsible for the spatial orientation. So when the hippocampus gets affected, the memory gets affected. So Alzheimer's dementia, predominantly it affects the hippocampus. So the memory gets affected, the spatial orientation gets affected. So they cannot find their way out or way to their home. And second thing, the nucleus basalis of Maynard gets affected, where there's a lot of acetylcholine, cholinergic input, and that also gets affected. So there's decrease in acetylcholine, and therefore a decrease in acetylcholine causes an impairment of memory, and therefore the principles of treatment consist of giving supplemental doses of acetylcholine, the cholinergic drugs, the acetylcholine inhibitors, namely donepezil, rivastigmine, and galantamine. Genetics. The chromosome 21 is involved basically, and therefore persons who have Down syndrome, they have the chromosome 21 being affected. So usually they do not live beyond 40 years. But in case they live beyond 40 years and they are likely to live to their old age, then most of them will develop Alzheimer's dementia, because Alzheimer's dementia also affects chromosome 21. So it affects the amyloid precursor protein. So there is an aggregation of the amyloid beta proteins, the senile blocks, and phosphorylation of tau proteins, forming the neurofibrillary tangles. So the chromosome 21 gets affected. They have the increased amyloid protein and then the paired neural helical neural filaments. So these are all the important pathological features of Alzheimer's disease. But most important, the hippocampus gets affected. So the short-term memory gets affected, the spatial orientation gets affected, then the nucleus basalis of Mayer gets affected, the cholinergic input gets affected, acetylcholine is decreased, and therefore they have memory impairment. These are the important features of Alzheimer's dementia. But how do we diagnose? As I said, the hippocampus basically gets affected. So when we do MRI brain, there's a diffuse atrophy of the brain, but more so in the hippocampus. So hippocampus primarily gets affected. How do we make out the hippocampus atrophy? The adjacent temporal horn will be dilated. So when we see the temporal horn, adjacent temporal horn getting dilated, then we know that the hippocampus, the adjoining hippocampus is atrophied. The treatment consists of the cholinergic drugs such as acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, namely donepezil, rivastigmine, and galantine. The glutamate is a neuroexcitatory substance, especially the NMDA glutamate is a neuroexcitatory substance. So we can give NMDA glutamate inhibitors like memantine. So these are all the core concepts of Alzheimer's dementia. Next, let's move on to the multi-infarct dementia. Multi-infarct dementia, as the name suggests, it is because of the vascular involvement. So vessels get affected, there will be a block, so person's memory will be slightly gets affected. Then after a few days, another block comes, again and further impairment of memory. So what happens is that there's a stepwise deterioration. Stepwise deterioration in multi-infarct dementia. Unlike Alzheimer's disease, which is a degenerative pathological disease, there's a gradual degeneration in Alzheimer's disease. But in multi-infarct dementia, it is because of vascular involvement, there's a stepwise deterioration. So we need to inquire the vascular risk factors like hypertension, diabetes, hyperlipidemia, smoking, and alcoholism. Multi-infarct dementia, it can affect the both cortex as well as the subcortical structures, and therefore sometimes it manifests as a cortical dementia or a subcortical dementia. So the cortex gets affected. The predominant clinical manifestation will be that of the cortex, like speech impairment if it is on the dominant cortex, or if it is a non-dominant cortex, there will be spatial disorientation, visuospatial dysfunction. When the subcortical structures are involved, especially the basal ganglia, they will have bradyphrenia. What is bradyphrenia? It is slowness of cognitive response and thinking. Bradyphrenia. So they'll have bradyphrenia, the slowness of the cognitive thinking and the response, and because the basal ganglia is affected, they'll have movement disorders. So cortex involvement, there will be cortical dementia, there will be involvement of cortical structures resulting in language disturbances or visuospatial dysfunction. If subcortical structures, basal ganglia are involved, there will be bradyphrenia, that is slowness in thinking, or movement disorders. This is about multi-infarct dementia. We all know that we have to control the risk factors in the form of for the treatment, and then we have to give antiplatelet agents. Dementia with Lewy bodies. Dementia with Lewy bodies, they have early dementia with fluctuating cognition, alertness. So one day they are all right, the next day they deteriorate again to become better and again to deteriorate. So they'll have dementia, very early dementia with cognitive fluctuations, that is the attention and alertness keeps fluctuating. Here one important point arises. Dementia with Lewy bodies also has dementia. Parkinson's disease, most of them also develop dementia. So how do we differentiate Parkinson's disease with dementia and dementia with Lewy body? We say early dementia, but what is the cutoff point? The cutoff point what we usually take is 1 year. So a person gets dementia within 1 year of developing the clinical manifestations of Parkinson's disease, especially the motor manifestations. We call that as dementia with Lewy body. But if a person with Parkinson's disease, the clinical manifestations, especially motor manifestations, develops dementia after 1 year, we call that the Parkinson's disease associated dementia. So there are 5 characteristic features of dementia with Lewy bodies. One, as I already said, the early dementia occurring less than 1 year of the Parkinsonian disease clinical features development with fluctuating consciousness, alertness, and response attention. Second, they have characteristic visual hallucinations. These are actually hallucinations, visual hallucinations, organic visual hallucinations. Unlike in other Parkinsonian diseases, where we see hallucinations perhaps because of the dopaminergic drugs. But here, the visual hallucination, whether we give dopaminergic drugs or not, they have visual hallucinations. So it is, the visual hallucinations are the hallucinations per se of dementia with Lewy bodies. Then they have the evidence of Parkinsonism. Obviously, they'll have evidence of Parkinsonism. But here, not only the substantia nigra, but other bodies also get, other parts of the brain also gets affected with characteristic Lewy bodies. Then, very interesting is that they have REM sleep behavior disorder, where they enact their dreams. Normally, nature has given a very protective phenomenon for us. In sleep, we have 2 phases, NREM sleep, REM sleep. Non-rapid eye movement sleep, as the name suggests, there is no rapid eye movement. Whereas rapid eye movement, there is rapid eye movement, and then it is in this phase that we get dreams. So normally when we get dreams and when we are really involved with the dreams, we may enact our dreams. Suppose we pick up a fight with other person, we may enact our dreams and actually we fight with the other persons. We may fight with the other persons. So nature has given a good protection that during REM sleep, we have paralysis of the limbs. There is atonia of the limbs. Even if you want to move away from the bed and injure the other persons, you can't. Because our limbs are paralyzed during the REM phase, atonia. So this is the wonderful protection given by the mother nature. But in persons with dementia with Lewy bodies, this protective effect is lost. So in REM sleep behavior, they have a disorder known as REM sleep behavior disorder, where there is no atonia, there is no paralysis of the muscles. So they can enact their dreams. If they think they are injuring others, they may go out of the bed and start injuring. They may enact their dreams because there is no paralysis of the limbs or no atonia of the limbs. So very important, REM sleep behavior disorder is one of the characteristic features of dementia with Lewy body disease. And then neuroleptic hypersensitivity. Generally we give dopaminergic drug for idiopathic Parkinson's disease, but here they become hypersensitive. So very difficult to manage dementia with Lewy body because they are very hypersensitive to neuroleptic neuroleptic medications. So the classic 5 features of dementia with Lewy bodies are that early dementia, less than 1 year of Parkinson's clinical manifestations, especially motor manifestations being developed. Visual hallucinations, they have visual hallucinations, they have evidence of Parkinsonisms, they have REM sleep behavior disorder, and they are hypersensitive to neuroleptic medications. The next important syndrome is Korsakoff syndrome. It is because of thiamine deficiency, vitamin B1 deficiency. The characteristic part which is involved is the mammillary bodies. Mammillary bodies are the part of Pepys circuit, and therefore when the mammillary body gets affected, they have loss of memory because it's a part of Pepys circuit. So mammillary body is characteristically involved in thiamine deficiency, Wernicke-Korsakoff psychosis. It could be because of alcoholism, or it could be because of in women hyperemesis gravidorum, or a person who is taking alcohol, and then if you give dextrose, whatever little thiamine is left out, this dextrose also can utilize the thiamine which is left out and precipitate a person to develop Korsakoff psychosis. The characteristic feature of Korsakoff psychosis is confabulation. They have lapses in memory, but they do not accept that they have lapses in memory. To cover up, they give false stories to fill in the gaps of the memory lapses. So they come up with false stories to fill in the gaps of the memory lapses, which is known as confabulation, which is very characteristic of Korsakoff psychosis. And they have the characteristic 3 features: GOA, G-O-A, G for global confusion, O for ophthalmoparesis, and A for ataxia, especially truncal ataxia. When we give thiamine, they recover very fast. In fact, ophthalmoplegia is the first to clear. The next we have is a normal pressure hydrocephalus. As the name suggests, it's a normal pressure. The hydrocephalus or the excessive CSF is formed or is present when there is a discrepancy between the production and absorption. So here in normal pressure hydrocephalus, what happens? There is an impairment of absorption. It could be tuberculosis, meningitis, or anything which impairs the absorption by arachnoid villi. So there's an impaired absorption as compared to the production, and therefore the CSF slowly starts accumulating, but it accumulates very slowly, and therefore the pressure is normal. Therefore we call it as normal pressure hydrocephalus. Especially the frontal horns of the lateral ventricle gets enlarged. What happens is the frontal horns of the lateral ventricles get enlarged. It goes and impinges on the medial part of the frontal lobe where there is a leg area, and the immediate memory goes to the frontal lobe, and the bladder area is also there. So when it goes and impinges the frontal lobe, we have again three characteristic features. One, because the medial part of the frontal lobe is affected, the leg area gets affected, so they'll have gait apraxia, and memory gets affected, especially the immediate memory gets affected, and since the bladder area is represented in the frontal lobe, they'll have urinary incontinence. This is the frontal lobe apraxia. So basically they'll not have any problem with the power of the legs. In fact, they can sit on the bed and can do all kinds of movements with the legs, cycling and all they can do, sitting on the bed. But if you ask them to go out of the bed and ask them to walk, they can't. So it's like a motor planning impairment. The motor power is normal, but the pattern, the way they have to use the muscles, that seems to have been disorganized because the frontal lobe is involved. So it's a gait apraxia. So this is a triad: gait, apraxia, incontinence of the urine, and dementia. So the CSF is more. So what we do, either we give drugs which decrease the CSF production like acetazolamide, or we take the CSF out 30 ml or 40 ml per sitting, so that the CSF is drained out and the pressure comes down. Yeah, then we have the prion diseases. It is because of the infectious proteinaceous diseases. The classic example is Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. And we have again a triad: a rapidly progressive dementia. Usually they will not see the next birthday. That means a very severe and bad prognosis. They probably not live even for beyond 6 months to 1 year. So rapidly progressive dementia. They have sensitive myoclonus, stimulus induced myoclonus. If they hear some sound, then they'll have immediately myoclonus. Very characteristic. Stimulus induced myoclonus. And then they have ataxia also because of the cerebellar pathway involvement. So a person having a stimulus induced myoclonus, rapidly progressive dementia. Unlike other dementias, Alzheimer's may take even 10 years. 3 years to develop dementia and another 6 or 7 years for a person to be in the hospital. So it may take 10 years, Alzheimer's dementia, but this dementia is going to proceed very fast, go on very rapidly. The prion disease, they may not even live up to 6 months to 1 year. So rapidly progressive dementia, always we have to think of prion disease, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. We can diagnose by either EEG or MRI or CSF. When we do EEG, they get periodic sharp wave complexes, periodic 1 per second sharp wave complexes they can get. And when we do MRI, we'll have the cortical ribboning. The peripheral parts get affected, a very characteristic feature. And when we do CSF analysis, we get 14-3-5 proteins. So EEG, we get periodic sharp wave complexes. And then we have the frontotemporal dementia. As the name suggests, the frontal lobe is involved, the temporal lobe is involved. Since the frontal lobe is involved, they'll have behavioral abnormalities, personality changes. And here, since the frontal lobe is involved, they can have progressive aphasias. Where if the Broca's area gets involved, they can have non-fluent aphasias. If temporal lobe gets affected, they'll have semantic aphasias. So dementia, which is slowly progressing with the behavioral abnormalities, personality changes, speech deficits, either non-fluent or semantic, always we have to think of the frontotemporal dementia. And because orbitofrontal part is involved, they'll have behavioral changes. And the frontotemporal dementia is sometimes associated with motor neuron disease, ALS. They occur together. It is because of the CSF-ORF72 mutation, which is very common to both, and therefore sometimes frontotemporal dementia may be associated with motor neuron disease. And then finally we have the major disease. We have the Huntington's chorea or Huntington's dementia. Again, there's a triad, there's a dementia, they have chorea, and familial tendencies, autosomal dominant, because of a trinucleotide repeat sequence. Because they have personality changes, behavioral abnormalities, suicide is very common in Huntington's chorea, so we need to be very careful. And then the other dementias are HIV dementia, where HIV can cause dementia, and chronic subdural hematoma. This is one of the treatable forms of dementia. Suppose a person gets injured, especially old persons, when the old person gets injured, there may be a trivial injury, minor injury, but then there could be a light venous rupture and blood may slowly start trickling down. And since it's a subdural hematoma, it is under the dura, it extends from the frontal to the occipital lobe also. So it goes and compresses the frontal areas and other areas also, so there will be memory loss. And therefore, when you take CT scan and or MRI and see the chronic subdural hematoma, all we need to do is to get a help of a neurosurgeon, take the hematoma out, and then once the hematoma is drained out, they become completely normal, and the dementia disappears. They regain their memory back. It is one of the most satisfying and treatable forms of dementia is chronic subdural hematoma, and therefore we should never miss on the treatable causes of dementia like chronic subdural hematoma, multi-infarct dementia, and Korsakoff psychosis because of the vitamin B1 deficiency or normal pressure hydrocephalus. So this is an overview of all the important forms of dementia, the core concepts, and of course the most important, the most common will be Alzheimer's dementia. The other cause of dementia are the multi-infarct dementia, dementia with Lewy bodies, normal pressure hydrocephalus, Wernicke-Korsakoff psychosis, prion diseases like Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, frontotemporal dementia, chronic subdural hematoma, HIV associated dementia, and Huntington's chorea. So if we know all these basic concepts, then we can approach a person confidently. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my lecture. If you have any suggestions or comments, kindly post on to my YouTube channel. But please like and subscribe my YouTube channel, Dr. Srinivas Medical Concepts, and my FB page, Dr. Srinivas Concepts. Thank you. Bye.